Welcome back to the Dershow. Before we get to the subject at hand, Trump lawfare again. One comment about an international matter. The Ukrainian secret police has claimed credit for assassinating a Russian general a few blocks from the Kremlin. It was really an audacious action, reminiscent of some of the things Israel and the United States has done. We killed Soleimani. But it's not without risks. If I were Zelensky, I would be doubling my guard and having a taster test all of his food and be wary of his doctors. The KGB basically originated assassination as a tactic of warfare. And so I think that it was an audacious move, but one with some considerable risks. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the man who, I'm not going to say allegedly killed, I'm a historian and a professor, not a defense attorney in this case, but the man who obviously killed the CEO has just been indicted. Interesting indictment. They added a claim that his murder, the murder, was a terrorist act. Now, you might wonder why. I have a theory. Okay. I think putting in a terrorist act was designed to blunt the possibility of an insanity defense because it gives them the opportunity to go to motives and to show that the man had a political motive. And a political motive is usually not particularly consistent with insanity, although we have seen in our history people with political motives also had mental illness. The first assassination in American history, Richard Lawrence's attempt to kill Andrew Jackson, the man was obviously bonkers, completely nuts, but he had a legitimate grievance. The same thing was true with the original McNaughton case and Hollifield's case in England. So sometimes we do see a mixture of insanity and politics, but when you charge somebody with terrorism, I think the jury is going to be less inclined to find insanity than they would if it was just an ordinary one-on-one murder. Who knows? We'll see. But interesting development in that case. Speaking of developments, this one was entirely predictable, uninteresting, boring, and just, D- in terms of legal quality. And that is Judge Marchand's decision to turn down Trump's lawyer's request to dismiss the indictment or at least grant a new trial on the ground that evidence came in to the hush money case in New York that involved Oval Office meetings with aides while President Trump was sitting president. And the Supreme Court granted him immunity from actions that he took while president, and it also granted him immunity from the use of evidence of actions that he took while president. So which Marchand ruled was that no, any of the actions that were designed, that were introduced into evidence were of private actions outside of his role as president. Basically what he's saying is the whole case was outside of his role as president, and therefore the Supreme Court ruling doesn't apply at all. But, then he did something else, clever, but wrong, unconstitutional. He basically said, I'm ruling, and even if I'm wrong, you can't appeal it. You can't appeal it because I'm going to be putting off the sentencing until after he finishes the presidency. And the rules in New York, you can't appeal something unless there's a sentence, so I'm not going to sentence you. And if I can't sentence you, I can't be proved wrong. So I am now above the law. I am the king. As I mentioned once before, there's an old expression in England that Her Majesty, or now His Majesty's subjects and judges are all, Majesty subjects are all presumed to know the law, except His Majesty's judges, and that's why they have a court of appeal set above them to set them right. So an appeal is part of the legal system. And when you render judgments the way Marchand has done, and then insulate yourself from appeal, either for 4 years or forever. There's some indication that what Marchant really wants is to suspend the sentence forever and have the conviction hanging over Trump's head like a sword of Damocles, that he enters the White House and the Oval Office as a convicted felon with no opportunity to appeal. That cannot be the law in New York or federally or constitutionally. You can't convict somebody and deny them the right to appeal by withholding the sentence. So what I think will happen is, if we'll know this soon, Marchant is going to have to rule on when and whether he will sentence Trump. And if he rules that the sentencing is put off 4 years, I would surely recommend to Trump's lawyers that they take a mandamus, that is a special writ to the appellate division, the next court. There are 3 levels of court in New York, essentially: the Supreme Court, which is the lowest court, the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court, and the intermediate court, which is the New York appellate division. That he take a mandamus to the appellate division and basically argue, look, you can't have a conviction without an appeal. And so if you can't appeal under New York law because there's no sentence, there are 2 or 3 remedies. Number one, we can review the case through mandamus, and that's a possibility. And the other is you can just throw out the conviction and not allow it to occur unless there's an appeal that is permitted. And so I would expect and hope that we don't have a situation where a president of the United States is sitting as a convicted felon, 32 counts or whatever the numbers are, really 1 count repeated 32 times, without there being an opportunity to challenge the conviction. The entire conviction is phony. The entire conviction is based on nothing other than a made-up law. And also there are rulings. I was in the courtroom. I saw them. There are rulings that are so plainly unconstitutional that and plainly illegal that if there was an appeal, it would be reversed. So I don't think we're going to see the current situation. Excuse me just 1 minute. Folks, I'm in the middle of it. Okay, I'm sorry. Somebody just intruded on my interview and I was getting diverted, so I've asked them to leave. Pardon me. Okay, back. I can now focus on you instead of on him. So I don't think that we're going to have a situation where the conviction will stand without there being an appeal. It's possible. Anything's possible in New York. The New York legal system has been weaponized generally against Trump. That's why I wrote my book called Get Trump. By the way, my new book, which you saw yesterday, is now #1 on Amazon among recently released books, newly released books. So, and I know a lot of you have bought the book because a number of you have written me notes, and a number of you have also written reviews of the book. So I am deeply, deeply appreciative. And if you want to help, send the message of these horrible lies that are being told about Israel, ranging from the Prime Minister of Ireland, who was commended by Hamas for his actions against Israel, to people on university campuses. If you want an answer to those questions, you can get it in the 10 Big Anti-Israel Lies. So again, I would very much appreciate if you send for the book $7, and it's all going to charity. Nobody's making any money on this book. 1 million copies have been printed. We're trying to distribute them on 1,000 college campuses. So let's work together to get this information out and get it widely circulated as much as possible. Getting back to Trump. The warfare continues. We still don't have a resolution to the Georgia case. Remember that the federal government can't prosecute a sitting president, and so they have withdrawn essentially the Washington case and the Florida case. Florida case is a classified material case. The Washington case is January 6th and thereabouts. But Georgia is also a January 6th thereabouts case, a post-election case. And the New York case is not a case. I mean, again, 60 years of practicing, teaching, and writing about criminal law. I don't understand it. I couldn't tell you with a straight face what the New York case is, but a jury convicted 32 times. And so I can understand why a judge wants to keep it from being appealed, but there's no way you can keep a case from being appealed. So, I will continue to focus on warfare against Trump, and warfare against others. If the Republicans start to use warfare against the Democrats, hey, I'll be on the side of anybody who's a victim of unconstitutional actions. I don't pick parties or partisan approaches or individuals when I decide what cases to litigate. And so, I turn down a lot of cases because I'm too busy, but I don't ever turn down cases based on partisan considerations. And I always apply what I call the shoe on the other foot test. It has to fit both shoes. It has to be equally applicable to both sides of the political spectrum and both parties and really all Americans. That's what equal protection of the law really means. And that's what the Bible meant when it says to judges, don't recognize faces. Low tech here upon him. Do not recognize faces. An important obligation for judges and prosecutors under the Bible and under the Constitution as well. I want to devote a lot of time today to questions because there were so many comments about my quote rant on gun control. Let me first make it clear. I didn't say a word about gun control. I didn't say a word. I didn't say a word about whether I think gun control laws are good things or bad things. I have my views on that, but it's not what the subject was. And I didn't talk about the Second Amendment, whether I favor the Second Amendment or don't favor the Second Amendment. That's not what I said. Let me tell you what I said one more time, and then we can read some of the questions and go through my answers. What I said was, even though I don't know whether taking away guns is possible, even though I don't know whether restricting guns would have an impact on, if laws restricting guns would have an impact on crime, what I did say is that the easy availability of guns in America, coupled now with the ability of people to make guns with 3D printers, has a direct relationship to the number of incidents of killings in schools like we saw in Madison yesterday, or in other places, that there is a relationship between the easy availability of guns and gun murders. It seems like a self-evident proposition, but I mean, people wrote me, you'll see, I'm never going to watch your show again because you want to take away our guns. I didn't say anything about taking away your guns. I'm making an empirical observation as a scholar. You can criticize me and criticize my scholarship. And people have written to me about other scholars who have disagreed with my views. And I read those books and I know their arguments, but it just seems to me overwhelming that the easy availability of guns. We don't know how this 15-year-old young woman got a hold of a gun, whether she got it from her parents. We don't know. We don't know very much about her. We know she's 15. We know her name. I don't think we know very much else about her. We know her parents are cooperating. We know she's dead. She killed herself. We know that the school was a school for troubled kids. Not necessarily only troubled kids, but apparently a school which specialized in helping kids through their teaching of Christianity, helping kids who had trouble in the public school. So we don't know very much about it, but the idea that a 15-year-old in America can get a hold of a gun and bring it to school and kill a teacher and a student and critically wound two others and wound several others, it's just a terrible thing. Now, there was a guy on television today, very good guy, I know him, from Boston, a professor of criminology, who said, let's not overstate the problem of school shootings. They're very rare, that an infinitesimal amount of students are ever been at risk. And we overstate it because, we all identify. We send our kids to school. Oh, my God, we have a shooting like this. You expect, going to school will be safe. As I mentioned yesterday, when I went to school, worst comes to worst, you'd have a black guy. I remember I was playing basketball in the backyard of my high school. I was a pretty good basketball player. And suddenly a rock hit me in the head. And some kid threw the rock at me and hit me in the head. And so I chased him. And he ran around the corner. And I picked up a seltzer bottle. Remember seltzer? There was seltzer bottles. And as he was turning the corner, I threw the seltzer bottle at the fence, the metal fence, and it broke open and cut him in the face. And, I was pleased. I did the right thing. I got even with a guy for hitting me in the head with a rock. But, that was about the worst you could ever expect from kids in high school or junior high school. But today, of course, you send your kid to school, you don't know. But Professor Fox was right. Don't exaggerate the problem. Sending kids to school is as safe as flying on an airplane. Yeah, there's an occasional crash, and there's an occasional school shooting. And my point was, is there a relationship between school shootings? Now, one of you wrote about that, and it was interesting. Maybe I'll just turn to that letter first, if I can find it. And the point was, the girl made the decision to bring a gun to settle what probably was a temporary problem. Okay, focus on that. Brought the gun to school to settle what was probably a temporary problem. She either got it from home, bought it online, or off the streets. But the gun itself did not make the decision to go to that school and target particular students. Personal responsibility, sir. Okay, I buy that. But let's assume that the writer is correct, that there was a temporary issue, and she was furious. She was mad. Somebody bullied her. Some teacher said something nasty about her. If she didn't have a gun, she might go to school and punch somebody, or she might run away, or she might do something else to show protest. But if there's a gun lying around the house and she has a temporary problem, the gun turns the temporary problem into tragically a permanent solution for 3 people, including her. And if the gun weren't there, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Maybe she would have picked up a knife. It's possible. You don't kill 3 people with a knife. When you're a 15-year-old girl, you probably can kill 1 person with a knife, or maybe just wound 1 person. A gun is different than a knife. And everybody has availability of knives. Just go into any kitchen drawer. And there are knives available. And a number of you said, well, we're going to take away guns. We should take away knives. No, I don't agree with that. Okay, let's turn to some of the other letters. I mentioned that we're not sicker than any other country. People say it's mental illness, but, there's no evidence that there's more mental illness in America than there is in Great Britain or Japan. Sorry, but yes, you are. The U.S. is completely insane. No, it's not. The U.S. is a great country and a healthy country. And, we're now seeing a debate about the new secretary that's been nominated for Secretary of Health. And he wants to make America a more healthy country. He's controversial. I've known Bobby Kennedy since he was a young man. He's very controversial. But his main point is transparency. His main point is to bring everything out into the open so people can make judgments for themselves. Okay. Here's another point that ran through a number of the letters. England, I made a comparison between England and the United States. England is as small as 1 American state, not a comparison. One person puts it a little bit more. Britain is the size of New Jersey, not a fair comparison. You know how many people live in England? England is not New Jersey. England has 68 million people. 68 million people. New Jersey has 9 million people. Don't make false statements about that. Yeah, England is the size of a state. Yeah, the size of California coupled with Texas. But, 68 million people, or California coupled with another state, maybe Florida. But it's not small. It's not tiny like New Jersey. It's a big, England's a big place. And it's very comparable to the United States in many ways. And the crime rate, the murder rate is so significantly below that you have to at least take that into consideration as a factor. Okay. I got 2 copies of your new book, one for me and one for my son for the winter holidays. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's very nice. Okay. Okay, now here, I got a bunch of letters criticizing me for saying that Jesus was a Jew, that Jesus was a descendant of David. Now, I don't want to put myself up as a better expert on the New Testament than Christians. By the way, I taught a course on the New Testament at Harvard Law School. I taught a course on the biblical sources of law, in which we study the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quran. I'm not an expert on the New Testament, but I've read it very carefully. It's a wonderful, wonderful document. I disagree with some of it, particularly the description of Jews killing Jesus. No, it was the Romans who killed Jesus, but there's no doubt that Jesus was a Jew. How could anybody doubt that? So here's the letter. Jesus, from the line of David. Come on, Dersh. Catholic theology states that the Virgin was impregnated by the Holy Spirit. How then is Jesus a direct descendant of King David? Hey, sir, have you ever heard of the word woman or mother? Everybody knows, even under Catholic theology or any Christian theology, that Jesus was born to a woman named Mary. All right, maybe Joseph wasn't the father. Maybe God was the father, but Mary was the mother, and Mary is a direct descendant of David. Look in Luke. Look in various other parts of the New Testament. They give the entire lineage. They give it from the time of Abraham or even before Abraham. And of course, the book of Isaiah says that the Messiah will be born to a descendant of David. And of course, he was born in Bethlehem, according to all accounts. And Bethlehem is in a place called Judea. Judea, that's where the word Jew comes from. Judea. It was named Palestine only to get revenge against the Jews who had revolted under Bar Kokhba. And so they named it Palestina, a fake name derived from the Philistines who had been extinct way before any of that happened. And so, of course, Jesus was a Jew. The Pope has said it. Every major Protestant leader has acknowledged that. And he never wore a keffiyeh. Of course he didn't. There were no Palestinians at the time, and there were no Muslims at the time. Islam didn't even begin until 600 years later. So get your facts right. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. All right, getting back to guns. Cut the anti-gun talk, Dershowitz. I left your podcast after that comment. All right, I'm not sure I want viewers who will leave the podcast if they disagree with something I say. Write me a letter. Scream at the screen. Argue. But don't leave the podcast if you don't like one thing I said. But there are a number of letters that say that. All right, here's another kind of nasty one. I'm not sure. Alan, serious question. Why do you live in the U.S.? Every fiber of your being is loyal to Israel. So why don't you live there? I mean, that's a little bit anti-Semitic. If everybody would ask an Irish American or an Italian American or people from other countries, a Greek American, that question. I love Israel. I support Israel, but I'm an American. I'm an American first. I'm a patriotic American. My relatives, served in the army. My relatives also served in the Israeli army. In America, you can have commitments to various things. If you're a feminist, you're an American and a feminist. If you're an Arab or a Palestinian American, you often will support Palestine and America. So I'm not moving out of America. I love America. I am an American. So why don't you live there? Further, why don't your fellow compatriots, the Jews, whose loyalties being the same, follow you over there? You want to get rid of all the Jews in America and have them go to Israel and go to your beloved homeland. Why do you choose to live in America? Is it the ability to influence the DC politicians? The Benjamins, the money. Is it the ability to influence DC politicians in using our military that keeps you here Is it the access to our financial system, the money, the Benjamins, both? It's obvious that there's no loyalty to America and our Constitution that keeps you here. You are an absolute bigot, an absolute anti-Semite. And I read letters like that to make it clear. Your name is Mickey Bitsko, Bitsko, and that's your view, and I will allow you to express it. But I'm sure as hell gonna answer it. Jews and people who support Israel are as much Americans as anyone else in this country, and we're not second-class citizens any more than Irish Americans, Italian Americans, Catholic Americans, Protestant Americans, feminist Americans. We all have multiple loyalties to commitments and values. Liberal Americans, conservative Americans. And the United States doesn't demand that you take a loyalty oath that requires you to reject commitment and support for Ireland or Israel or Italy or any other country. Yeah, we're Americans, and many of us Jews, disproportionately high number of Jews have died for their country from the Civil War on. And Jews should be very proud of both being Americans and Jews and supporters of Israel. I'm going to continue to do that. I'm not going to move to Israel, but I'm going to continue to support Israel when I believe Israel is in the right. Your ignorance on firearms made me stop watching this entire stream. Unfortunately, as I wanted to hear remarks on Trump, maybe I'll catch it on a clip on someone else's channel. I can't support your video, though. I'm not asking you to support my video. Just listen to my views and disagree with them. Again, I took no position on gun control laws. I don't know whether they work or not. I made an empirical observation, which is either true or false. It's not a matter of opinion. And that is, does the easy availability of so many guns in America contribute, as a matter of fact, to the very high rate of killings, and especially gun killings in America? So much higher than in comparable countries like Great Britain. Okay. I watch your show every Monday through Wednesday. I don't think you intended it to be offensive, but this was the worst show in the 4 years I've watched. Please stop talking about the Christian religion and giving Jews credit for everything, including saying Christian religion wouldn't exist without the Jewish roots, and calling Jesus a Jew. That comes from Christianity. That's in the New Testament, not the Old Testament. The Old Testament doesn't mention Jesus. There's nothing in the Jewish religion about Jesus. It's only in the Christian religion. And it's the Christian religion that says that Jesus was a Jew, born in Judea, went to the temple, the Holy Temple. We know that not from Jewish sources, but from Christian sources. It's so incredibly one-sided and borders on bigotry. You don't know, and neither do the historians who told you things that comported with your pre-existing Jewish beliefs. You can't just listen to them and categorically, deliberately ignore historians that would teach to the contrary. I challenge you to name one historian that will deny that Jesus was a Jew who was born in Bethlehem and lived in Judea. The reality is that no one can prove what happened thousands of years to a point of 100% certainty. Yes, you can. Look at the archaeological record. That's proof, absolute proof. We know that Jews lived in what is now Judea because we have found coins and other things. I own some of them. I know, I've had them in my hand. I'll just say Jews couldn't exist without their Christian roots. How do you like that? It's your opinion. I don't understand it, but it's your opinion. It shows to me a little bit of bigotry. Great argument. But when you can produce a gun with a printer, what do you want? You're absolutely right. I'm not saying there's a solution to this problem. Guns are easily available. There's too many of them to take away. No law will change that. And the ability to print guns via a printer, whether you can control that by law or not, I don't know. I'm just repeating my point. The easy availability of guns in any country, will make murder rates higher. Now, a couple of people pointed to Israel saying, oh, there's guns all over Israel. No, Israel has very, very tough gun control laws. Of course, you can have a gun if you're in the military. And you walk through the streets of Jerusalem, you see, 18, 19-year-old young women carrying an Uzi machine gun. Yeah, if you're in the military. But if you're an ordinary citizen living in the middle of Tel Aviv or Jerusalem and you want a gun, you better have a very good reason for having it. And there are good reasons for having it because there's terrorism. And so you can't, A, make analogies between Israel and the United States, and B, you can't say that their guns are easily as available in Israel as they are in the United States. They're not to civilians. So we will see you tomorrow and keep up the controversy. And if you don't like what I say, write me. I'll answer you, but don't just change the channel. You can change the channel. That's your right. But you also have the right to write me, and I will answer you. See you tomorrow.